Alex, why don't you tell me briefly about how it is that you came to live in the United States?
Well, I was born in 1902 in the city of Kiev in Russia, which is a southern part of Russia. It's called Ukraine or Ukraine. It's a very respectable part of Russia and known as a breadbasket of all Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And I live with my family, my mother and father and my sister. She was about a year and a half older than I was, and spent all my school days at home studying. And at the same time, a revolution started in 1917 in the northern part of Russia. And the turmoil and not knowing just what's going to happen kept everybody on alert, so to speak. At the beginning of a revolution, we had rumors of Tsar being arrested and executed. The Bolsheviks took over the government of Russia, and one of the worst things they did, they issued an order. The war was still on, and it was probably 500,000 army at the front. They gave order to the front to abandon your supervision. In other words, officers. You select your own committees and quit fighting. Organize and march home. And we are welcome to meet you, or something like this, you see. So all the officers ran to save their lives, because it already began this killing. They were just killing officers if they had a chance to get all of them. So most of them did manage to get away, and they all moved towards south, and eventually they organized, and that was the beginning of organization of the White Army. This band marching north, armed, organized in groups. They loot and kill people, and if they get into a village, they find out who is in charge, they kill them, arrest them.
Now, Alex, are you talking about the Red Army and the Bolsheviks are doing this?
The Red Army, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. Bolsheviks is a Red Army.
Yeah. And the White Army is made up of the officers that had to start their own.
Right.
Their own defense.
Right.
I see.
Well, anyway, when towards 1918, we had the experience of seeing the Red Army take over Kiev, where I lived, see. And it didn't last very long, because the White Army was organized and was right behind them, and they chased them out of Kiev up north, and it was for a while safe. And all this time we were concerned about the future, not knowing how long it's going to last and what's going to happen to us. And in 1918, the White Army was very successful, and for a time being it looked like the revolution will be crushed. They were near the Moscow, was the last foothold of the Red Army. Then something happened, as we later found out, that the White Army went so fast and they took prisoners in such a tremendous amount of people, by tens and tens of thousands of people. They weren't able to control them because they were on the march chasing the Reds. And when this time came, then the rumors were that the uprising started in the rear of the White Army. And that looked to us like we might be in danger of seeing the Red Army back again, you see. So in the schools, in my class, it was a patriotic spirit to join the army. And I talked to my father, and he said to me, well, I think you're doing the right thing. So I joined the White Army, and I stayed in Kiev, and the training came right nearby, not too far from our house, and eventually my unit was connected to General Bredov's unit. Well, anyway, to make it short, we cannot continue our passage to south of Odessa because of the Red Army cutting our path across. We were forced to evacuate from the trains and start our march towards Romania. It was a cruel, very difficult time for thousands of us trying to walk through deep and snow and unfamiliar surroundings and half starving with a very limited supply of food and so on. During the passage, we tried to negotiate with Romania, and Romania weren't willing to let us across. So we fought our way to Poland, and we finally reached Poland and negotiated with them, and they allow us in. So we crossed the border, and they put us in a camp, like an internment camp. And we spent several months in Poland negotiating with our allies, trying to figure a way how we can get back to Crimea. The Russia White Army was still holding this part, and through efforts of allies and cooperation with Poland, we finally moved towards Crimea. When we arrived in Crimea, they met us with open arms of a unit of General Bredov, gave us new uniforms, and immediately sent us to the front, fight the Red Army. There, within a few days, the field where I was stationed it looked like a watermelon field. We were entrenched and shooting whatever moves in front of us. In 2 or 3 days, we started to advance, and at that time I was wounded. They picked me up and brought me back to the rear of Crimea and Sevastopol in the hospital, and I eventually was evacuated to the Black Sea, and from Black Sea through Dardanelles, arrived in Constantinople. In Constantinople, I lived there for 1.5 years and made fairly comfortable living, quit working in the restaurant, and that's what I really started my career in the food business. At this time, the Turkey were friendly with us, and all of a sudden they changed their attitude towards the refugees, the white Army refugees, and they started to negotiate with the Soviets. And one of the prime demands of the Soviets was to return all the white Russians back to Russia to face the trial or so, whatever. Otherwise, they weren't interested in doing anything. When this happened, our consulate and representatives, about thousands of the white Russians, started to yell for help to the United States, France, England, and Italy. They respond very quickly and quickly organize the ways of escape to different parts of the world. I was fortunate or inclined to go to France because I spoke French, and with the French consulate. And I got my visa with no difficulty. But the date of departure some time in, I think it was in June. Now, in my connection in a restaurant, I got familiar with the ambassador of Bristol and all the embassy personnel. They were our regular customers, and they gave a lot of parties for large groups and so on. And through the good graces of a secretary to the admiral, the ones that I dealt with making reservations and so on, I talked to her and asked her if there's any chance for me to go to the United States instead of France, and I told her I already have a visa to go to France. And she quickly found a way and notified me that there is an organization in New York headed by Mrs. Vanderbilt and Lady Astor and other society ladies, and they have a committee to help Russian students in exile, and you will fit to be in that group. And I said, I'll be delighted. So very quickly I was sent to American consulate with the certificate from the ambassador to the United States, Admiral Bristol, and the signature of the one of the Navy personnel who guaranteed my being qualified for this particular group. And I got permit and visa to go to the United States, set a date, and we luxuriously went to, I think it's a British ship called Mauritania, and we arrived in New York on July 23rd, July in 1923. In fact, it was the 3rd of July when we arrived.
Alex, did you want to say what kind of a passport it was that you had? That was a special passport.
Yes. While the question of us being in Turkey was raised, the Swedish organization issued us passports, which was called a Nansen passport to a man without a country, which was a very valuable instrument. It was beautifully done. It was gold-leafed seals with this written and beautiful really a handwriting. It was a beautifully written with the words like, I am the king, and in the name, Alex Gusev then, is my friend, and I want you and every king and every person, any country in the world, to give their assistance, and I'll be grateful, and so on and so on, and signed by him, and that was nonsense on the parchment paper. It was very beautiful.
Was the passport from Turkey, or where was the passport actually from? Who gave you the passport?
The Nansen's passport was issued to a Russian consulate. Mm-hmm. It's to a Russian consulate.
I see. Okay. Why don't you tell us about your mother's family and history?
Sure. Well, my mother's family is quite a large family. They were located in Kiev. Practically half family was in Odessa, which is a large city on the Black Sea, where they had factories. And they also had a chain of stores. The manufacturing consisted of similar products and a size as the Heinz company in this country, for the national distribution. And in Kiev, we lived in well, very nice home. My sister, my father, and a very large house. In fact, we had people that work in a store. We had one store in Kiev under the name of Suvor's, with a similar sign of a store that was in several cities, established in 1861 and known all over Russia. And some of it, in the late years, it was even exported to Europe.
Alex, why don't you tell us something about the chain of stores? What were the chain of stores associated in some way to the factories, the tomato canning?
Right. The principal canning factories were in Odessa. In Kiev were imported items such as Swiss cheese, which was brought from Switzerland and was stored and then distributed from our area in Kiev. The store varieties it's a very substantial size store with a full assortment of canned goods, and caviar was a very big item, smoked salmon and imported cheeses and all kinds of fish, smoked fish, and herring, even marinated eels, I remember, were on display with a barrel. And the stores, our store was staffed with experienced people, that with the manager and the cashier and so on. And they really, under supervision of my father, were making displays and changing displays and featuring certain items in a store. On certain days of the week, they have a certain item for sale, like. And my father was a major supplier of raw material for the factories in Odessa and also in Kiev. Now, the mother's side of the family also lived in Kiev, about 3-4 miles from where we are, and they also had a store there. And that store was a very well established, because our store was opened a little later. And in that store, they had miniature, shut up,
Go on. Keep going.
miniature factories. And I remember in the back of the store was a yard, and we had caves that were specially storage area for Swiss cheese, which comes in a very large discs, weighs about 150 pounds each, and when they bring it in, they roll them into the special slots in this cave with a controlled temperature and so on. I remember when I was a little boy, I remember my father used to go to test this cheese with a special instrument. So like a G-shaped pipe made with very shiny, I can't think of a name of that material. And it's very sharp on the bottom and slit in the middle, and you kind of twist this inside of the cheese and pull it out, and you come out with a long piece of a cheese, and it tells you by feeling in your hand or tasting it, you can tell whether this cheese is ripe enough or ready to be sold. And next to this was a large ice house where they bring ice in the wintertime and pack it in burlap bags and so on. And the fishes and other things were stored in that area. And in my other family, in the other store, their operation was a little more, much more elaborate, because they were manufacturing certain things for the whole stores. For instance, mustard was manufactured in that area. And also they had certain areas for manufacturing around Kiev. Some of them were about 30 miles away from Kiev, some of them were 40 miles away from Kiev. On the river Dnieper, which is a very large river with boats. You take a boat and bring your crew, and you have a certain designated areas where they grow mushrooms, for instance. Area maybe 5 miles or 4 miles, and it was controlled by the government and looked after, so there was nothing to be there that would interfere with the proper growth of mushrooms. And all the villages were working for different concerns, and they would gather the mushrooms and bring to certain areas. The areas that you get once a year, for instance, they have a certain date when they have like a lottery. They draw the number of a lot that you will be allotted, and that lot belongs to you for that particular year. So all the equipment is always in that area that belongs to you, and they set it up, and the group starts operate in season, and the mushrooms come different sizes, and the different way of processing mushrooms. Most of them are canned. They can mushrooms, but on different sizes and so on. Some mushrooms are dry mushrooms. They use for soups and sauces and so on. The other area was at the battle, where they grow fields and fields of tomatoes, and they were machinery and a special barracks, like a factory barracks, or stationary every year. You go over there with your crew, and they pick tomatoes and wash tomatoes in a certain way. And then some of them is boiled and steamed, and also put in the cans, they're labeled and shipped back to Kiev, and some of it was going down south to the Odessa area and so on.
Alex, are you saying that your family's business was involved not only in the retail side of selling food, but also in processing various kinds of food?
Yes.
And the various processed food that your family business was involved in would be tomatoes, mushrooms, mustard, those sorts of things?
Yes, and it's hard to even mention the number of items. The way you look at it, like in the shopping supermarket, you go from one aisle to another, and they have a certain things. One's the canned vegetables and canned fruit, and so on. It's the same thing there. See, the food manufactured in the Odessa area, but they had they marinated fishes, for instance, marinated stuffed cabbage, which was a very popular item, and so on. Plus, similar to tomato, all the tomato juices, tomato purees in different sizes, different textures, and so on.
Now, how many retail stores did your family own altogether? It was a chain, is that right?
Yes, eight stores.
And where were
The
they
latest one, the latest two were in Moscow. They were there maybe, well, I must have been about 14, 15 years old when they opened 2 stores in Moscow and 2 stores in Kiev, and then other cities, and 2 or 3 in Odessa, or 1 in Sevastopol, or something like that, in the Crimea.
So is that all that you want to say about the stores?
Right.
We forgot to talk about General Suvorov.
Right. My mother and my mother's family, actually, are the descendants of General Suvorov, who was general of 18th century. The name of it really was a Generalissimo Suvorov, very popular in Russia and very politically very powerful, similar to George Washington in this country. And he prepared, organized Russian army on the newest scale with new principles and so on. And his army eventually defeated Napoleon in 1812. He also was known for being a gourmet. His certain items were known all over the world. The item like a pheasant Suvorov. You can find it in any cookbook of Escoffier. Like he has his items, in other words, they're veal items, veal cutlets, la Suvorov. And my mother's 2 sisters and 2 brothers. Brothers lived in Odessa, and very seldom I visit them, but I remember one thing. I remember the beautiful home they had on the Black Sea, a huge garden, and I forgot the name of the birds. the
Peacock.
Peacocks, 4 peacocks. They were walking around, and you sit in the veranda, and they come near you and all this kind of. The immediate family that were in Kiev, we were very close to on the holidays.
And your grandmother and your grandfather actually lived in Kiev.
Right, they lived in Kiev.
Now, Alex, tell me what your mother's full name was.
Anna Afanasievna Suvorova.
I see. So she was actually a Suvorov.
Right, but she was a Suvorova until she married my father.
Right.
Then she became Guseva.
Right.
The names are a little different, like the females and the male names. The middle name is always the name of your father.
Your father's first name?
Yeah, no. Your father's first name is the middle name of the children, whether they're male or female.
Right. So explain how your middle name is the same as your sister's middle name, but it's said differently.
Yeah, spelled a little differently. My father is Nicholas, so my middle name is Alexander Nicholas Gusev. And my sister's name will be Maria Nikolaevna instead of Nicholas. Nikolaevna Guseva. Guseva.
Okay. Is there anything else that you can think of about your mother's family? I think we've covered just about everything.
Well, I remember one of my pet recollections is our summer home.
That was spent with your mother's family?
No, we had this, the house was ours, but they were with us all the time,
Right.
just like without any separation. So
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about that a little later when we talk about your boyhood, okay? Why don't you tell me about your father and your father's family and the things that you remember on that side of
Yes.
your...
Well, my father was born not in Kiev, but outside of Moscow, and all of his relatives came from the northern part of Russia. In fact, they were very large landowners, family-owned land for generations. The size was something like that. There were 17 villages, about 250 miles east of St. Petersburg, and probably 300-400 miles north of Moscow area. And my father was a food broker on a large scale. He had a contract with the government to supply Russian army with certain foods, such as oil, grain, sugar, wheat, and so on. And in order to, during the war, where transportation facilities were taxed, it was almost impossible for a private person to obtain the facilities of a railroad. But my father had allocated to him a certain number of cars so that he could supply the army with foods.
Now, Alex, when you're talking about the war, you're talking about the First World War.
Yeah, 1914.
Right. And then also, your father did not work for the government. He had a contract with the
Yes,
government, right?
he
He
did not
wasn't a
work.
government official in any way.
No, but he knew a lot of very influential people in armed forces, for instance. And even later on, I remember that we always having visitors or guests when they visited Kiev. There would be from government staff. And he also was connected with the firm of Suvorovs. Originally he was the one that supplied them with raw material for manufacturing, whatever is necessary. And this is probably how he met my mother and married.
So he had been involved with the fresh produce like your mother's family, but he was more involved with sugar and salt and
a
oil.
large scale.
And that sort of thing.
Fish, dry fish, and canned goods too, anything that they use in the army. And when he married my mother and moved to Kiev, and they continued the same kind of a business, only he was much closer connected with the Suvorovs firm, you see. And he was in complete charge of the store in Kiev, in our area. And the mother's side, they had another store in Kiev, with a pretty large operation also. And his hobbies was a hunter. I remember that we had trophies in the dining room area, the antlers and so on. And he was always busy and did a lot of travel, particularly when I was growing up. He was most of the time out of town.
Did he ever travel internationally?
Yes, to France, yes. To France when they were dealing with the canard frere, sardines, so that we sell French sardines in Russia, and they would take our product to sell to France.
Did your father speak French?
Yes, that's French.
Alex, why don't you tell us about what happened to your father because of the revolution and people like him that were in large businesses?
Right. Well, when the army stopped fighting because of the Bolsheviks' order, they laid down the arms, so to speak, and turned away and left the front unattended.
Alex, now this was the regular Russian army.
Right. They turned to be communist. Not all of them, but they all came armed and joined the Red Army, you see. And they were under a Red Army supervision, so to speak, when they came to Kiev the first time. They would arrest any person that they think is a bourgeois and put them in the compounds, and usually they machine gun them and keep going to the next place. They did it in the villages and the cities. In the cities they did a more thorough job by trying to force people to tell them who is a banker and who is a mayor and who is
people of authority,
and who owns the stores and all this kind of a thing. And they arrest people right and left. In the whole of Russia, they probably murder hundreds of thousands intelligentsia or aristocracy, any high people in the army, colonels, generals, whoever they can get hold of. So they broke into our house one evening, and the commissar with the leather jacket and the red star on his hat with a gun in his hand, and the 3 soldiers with the bayonets walked through the house, started to ask questions. And one soldier, I remember, we had a living room set in the living room. It was an area for a sitting area with the French furniture and a table and chairs around and the carpet, and it was a traditional setting in homes with the family album would be on the table for the people to look at the pictures of friends and so on. And they cut the settees for green silk, and it was a very expensive thick wood furniture with inlaid gold stripes with the very ornate legs, table legs and all this kind of thing. And they puncture holes in the paintings on the wall.
Did they do this with their bayonets?
Bayonets, yes. And they got hold of my father, and one fellow in front, the other fellow in the back, and said, "You come along with us." And they took him away. And before they did, they went in the bedroom, I remember. And the bedroom was an armoire. And they opened up the armoire and looked what was in there. There's one section like for coats and dresses and so on. The other part is shelves and drawers with different things, and they were looking for jewelry. But they didn't find anything eventually. Actually, the jewelry was there. But they used to make these armoires in such a way that there's certain secret drawers you can't see unless you know where it is. So they didn't take any jewelry, but they took father away. My father was, and we knew what was going to happen because everywhere else, that's what they were doing. They arrest people and just machine gun.
So you just thought that would be the last
That
time
would be
you'd
the
see
end.
him?
That's right. But the White Army was moving very fast towards us. And a few days went by and we heard the artillery pounding around the city, and we knew the White Army was coming. And they did come. They come very, very quick. So the Reds disappeared, and the White Army was chasing out. And apparently they didn't have time to execute this group. So my father came back. He came back, and the very next day, my mother discovered that his hair, right, and the forehead area turned gray.
Did it turn gray in those
Yeah,
few days that
that's
he had
right,
been in
yeah.
captivity?
Right.
Mhm.
From fear or whatever. And so we continued to live again. And should I mention about my joining the army now?
Is that the time that you did join the army?
Right.
Right in that point in time. So it
Right.
wasn't very long before the Reds came back, is that right?
That's right. And the school, we were past half semester, and I think it was about January at the time, and the school gave us permission for anybody that wants to volunteer into a white army, they will issue us a diplomas, you see. And we get our diplomas, and I volunteer into a white army. And I was stationed not too far from where we lived, in a special barracks, and it was a training center. And I stayed there about a month and a half or so. And then we've heard that the revolution will be crushed any day. The White Army was surrounding Reds from every angle. So the northern part was the army of Kolchak was moving from Siberian side. The Denikins army was moving from the middle part, and the General Brevis was from the southern part. So 3 armies was organized, and they kind of got the Bolsheviks against the wall, and it looked like a revolution would be over, you see. But then something happened. We found out later that the White Army were moving so fast, fighting so quick towards north, that they were taking prisoners by thousands and thousands. Tens of thousands were surrendering because some of them were not organized, they're not trained soldiers surrendering, you know. And somehow they start to organize behind the line of White Army. And they plundered the warehouses and the military warehouses and got ammunition and all this kind of thing, and they start to fight the White Army from the rear.
So it was actually the prisoners
Right.
that started to
Right.
fight the White Army.
Right. And when that happened, then the White Army tried to consolidate and retreat. So Kolchak's army went back to Siberia. There was a lot of Russians, White Russians, settled there. They never got back, you see. And the southern part of where we were was under General Bradov, and he moved to Kiev on a train. It's a train that's made into, well, it's covered with bulletproof metals and machine guns and artillery. And
Did you
so
see this train?
Oh, yes. And that was a very common thing during the revolution. These trains were used for that purpose.
Probably a frightening looking train, wasn't
Oh,
it?
yes.
With the machine guns on
Right,
top and
Right. And so I was told through a lieutenant who was in charge of my units, only a few of us, I think it was about 16 men. Half of them I knew from my class. And he told me, he said, you better call your father, because you probably have to move out very quick to go south, you see. And I said, when do you think it's going to happen? He said, well, so far as it's scheduled that we leave at 8 o'clock in the morning, next morning, you see. So I called my father and told him that we're going on the train, and he already made arrangements with, he knew General Bradley himself, so they would accept him to go with the army unit south, with the destination that then was Odessa. And so I called and I told my father that meet us at the train tonight, because we're going to leave at 8 o'clock in the morning, you see. And we got to the train and we got settled where we're going to stay. It was right next to the car of headquarters. And I was training or doing some work in the communication, like extending the cables and things like this. And so that evening, we boarded train sometime in the afternoon, I think. And very shortly, we didn't have even chance to settle down. Then we got news that we were moving out, and the train pulled away.
So you were expecting to see your father
Right.
again, but the train left
Right.
that
And
evening instead of the
yes.
next morning.
And I never saw my father since then.
Mhm.
That was
Right. Now, what do you think happened to your father? Do you think
Well,
that he
the
lived through?
the rumors were when we were back to the Crimea later that they execute everybody. You see. And in Turkey, which was a year and a half later, I found one of my relatives who escaped from Russia. And he was, his name was Smirnov. He was a manufacturer of paper goods, and paper bags and paper cartons and boxes and
He didn't make
wax
vodka like the
paper.
Smirnoff vodka, but that's the
No.
same name, right?
And it's a very common name, by the way. In Russia, Smirnov, just like a Jones here. And, and he told me that they execute everybody. And part of his relatives were killed.
And he was
The
from
same
Kiev.
place, from Kiev, yes. And how he escaped was, he told me, through Finland. How he got to the Finland, I don't know, you see.
He escaped to Finland, and
Yeah,
you saw him in Turkey.
Yeah, from Finland, you know, he went right through to Poland, to Bulgaria, Romania, to Dardanelles near the Constantinople, and got in Constantinople, you see. And he was a very enterprising man. I mean, you never get lost anywhere, see, because he immediately start business to sell jewelry. You see, he had some jewelry, his family, I guess, his wives or whatever. And then he started buy and sell jewelry, watches and chains, bracelets and all this kind of thing, and make a pretty good living out there.
Was he a close relative, or was he just a distant relative?
No, he is a relative of my father, you see.
Did you keep track of him? Do you know where he is now?
No. I imagine most of them then left for France. Bunch of them went to Paris at that time, see, just before I left. I would have been there, but I've changed my plans. I'm glad I did.
Alex, we have taken you up to the point where you actually got on the train to leave Kiev with General Bradov's army, and you didn't get to see your father because the train left earlier than you expected.
Right.
Why don't you go on from there and tell us what happened?
Right. But yeah, the train stopped before we can reach Odessa, and we found that the pathway was cut off by the Bolsheviks around it. So we were practically surrounded by them, and we had no choice but evacuate as quick as possible.
Right.
So
Now, Alex, what time of the year was this?
it was January, probably the end of January.
So it was about the coldest time of the
Yeah,
year
cold,
for
very
you to start your career in the Army, huh?
And we quickly disembark and proceed moving towards Romania with the idea that Romania will let us across, and it was a grueling march with a very little chance actually to survive. We lost a tremendous amount of people. Some people were just dropping out, not able to continue, and all the time surrounded, not surrounded, but on one side is a line of Bolsheviks army sniping at us, and we have to guard our way and move as quick as we could, yet we have to stay as a unit so that we can protect ourselves.
So, were you marching through snow? Was there a lot of
Yes, through
snow?
the snow, to the village, from village to village. We stopped at the village, stopped overnight, and villagers were very sympathetic to us and give us food, whatever we need, and we stay overnight. And there was no chance really to take a bath or anything like this, but you can rest at least. At one time, I remember, when we got to the village, being at the general's headquarters, they always had the largest house for his surrounding people. And the first thing you would do is to take the boots off, try to warm up the feet. And in each village house, usually you have a stove, which is it's a wooden stoves, large ones, with the area on the sides of it and the front of it, which is fairly warm. And people just put boots right on the edge of the stove, as many as they could make it, you know. And over the stove is usually a string. They use these for towels, dish towels. They hang them over like this or something like this. So when I get in, it wasn't any room on the stove for my boots. So I saw that string over, so I tied the holders of a boot together and put my boots over the stove. But the stove wasn't burning, you know, but it was hot. And just lay down on the floor and sleep. And down with the machine guns right to the windows. And it felt like, it sounded like a machine gun fire, you know, constant. So everybody laid down low and trying to scramble up and get up, and get out of the house. So that everybody went for boots, quick, put them on and out. And by the time I get to mine, my boots were in the middle of the stove.
Had they dropped on the stove?
Yeah, somehow they hit the weight of them. I don't know what happened, but they were all curled up. They didn't burn, but I couldn't unbend them or anything, you know.
Because they'd been wet.
Right, and we had no time. We just had to get out. You grab your carabine and out, and catch up with the rest of them. Get hold of a wagon and get on the wagon. And the next time we stopped at the...
So you had no boots on?
No boots on. And I cover up with anything I can find in the wagon. So the next village we stopped at the house, and I went in, and a lady in the house noticed that I didn't know. Her feet must be frozen. She looked at my feet and said, "I think I have something." And she went out and she brought a jar of goose fat, and she massaged my feet and cover up with the goose fat. And that I get up the next day and my feet began to feel a little better circulation, you know. And I continue on, but I couldn't walk. I still was in the wagon for 2 or 3 days. And eventually my circulation came back and I was able to get the boots on, taken from somebody. We had a wound that people that couldn't wear boots. And that's why I continue my passageway until we reach Poland. When we reached Poland, they put us through a regular process of cleansing process, I would say, is to take the uniforms and dip them in some kind of a solution and spray your hair and your body, delousing and all that. Then you take a shower and they give uniforms and new boots and hats, and we were able to feel like we were cleaned up a little bit and put in the barracks. It's like an internment compound. Out of it's hard to say how many people actually started and how many were lost, but I would say about 2,500 was survived the passage. And later on I found that there was a book written in French about our passage from Odessa to Poland and how many people died.
Do you remember the name of the book?
Iced March, but it's in French. Something I can't think of it at the moment. And so we stayed fairly comfortable in tents. And I remember we got news that the American Red Cross is going to visit us. And a couple of days later they arrived, the trucks, and give us a huge box for each person with a blanket, underwear, soap, toothbrush, paste, towels, and some, I think it was some like a chocolates or something like this. And that was a very pleasant surprise and badly needed to have something like this, particularly a blanket. And so we stayed there until must have been July. All this time we were in the contact with our allies, and the remaining White Army was still fighting in the Crimea, and through efforts of allies, United States, England, France, and Italy, they found a way to transport us from there back to Crimea. And we took trains to a port, the nearest one from across the Black Sea to Crimean port, and boarded the ship, and all of us moved to Crimea. It's not a very far, I think it's about 5 hours or something like this. When we arrived in Sevastopol, they met us, and with the orchestra and with the banners, welcome, and so on.
Tell us about how many of there were you that had made it through the ice march, through the internship in
About
Poland?
2,500. 2,500. But it was originally, it was probably 4,000.
Were any of the friends from school that were with you, were they still there? Had any of them died along the way?
Yes, one friend of mine from my school froze to death. See, it was times when we had some artillery, you see, but the horses pulling the artillery, and it was hilly spots, and it just the whole convoy stops until you get through this particular area, you see. And when it does happen, then everybody stays and everybody's notified, and they usually build a fire with some wagons that are abolished, you know, and try to walk around and keep warm around the fire. And I did, and a friend of mine was sitting in the wagon, and he wouldn't get up, you see. And I told him, I said, hey, get up and see if you can get warmed up, move, you know. And he finally did, and he went and apparently sat on the side of a stump or something on the hill like, and sat there, you see. And we didn't move for hours, you see. And I don't know what happened, but he never came back. See, whether he was stayed there, and usually, you know, when you're almost frozen, you fall asleep or something, I don't know. So I never saw him. The next day he wasn't there, you know. And a lot of people were still fighting. On the front we had a Kafka's unit, horsemen, cavalry men, and they are the ones who really were protecting us, because they were on horseback, you know, and they were guiding us which way to go. There was a certain group with the machine guns in front of a column, moving column, you know. And finally we got to cross the border.
Right. Okay, now back to the Crimea. You had the 2,500 of you that had survived the
Right.
ordeal arrived to
Right.
waving flags and music, apparently.
Yeah, Brothers Battalion. And they issue us new uniforms. We just got, the one uniforms, what we got, kind of shirts, you know. But we got the regular uniforms and a new carabine, and they organized into units, platoons and so forth, and immediately moved to the front to relieve the White Army that was fighting there for many, many months, you see. So we got in, we relieved, we took up a certain position, and it was a field of melons, like watermelon field or something like that, sandy field, and we built trenches, sitting in trenches, and somebody with the binoculars behind watching, and you shoot anything, you see it moving in front of you. Then 2 or 3 days later we received order to advance. See, so we start moving in the chain like forward, and one spot was like a fence, not the fence that you build around the house, but the fence that's built on the field, you know, just to mark the line. So anyway, you can bend down and climb over and get through it, you see. And right then, I fell behind a little bit the line, so I started to run a little bit. And when I did, I felt I got hit right in my leg. And well, I didn't even know where. It was just kind of a dull pain, like you hit eye or something, something right across.
Sort of
But you
stunned.
don't, that's
You're
right, you don't
stunned.
know where, but you feel that you're not right, you see. Then you make 2 more, 3 more steps, then you fall down, you realize that you can't walk. So you lay there on the sand until the medic man with his partner came along and put me on the
How long
stretcher.
did you have to lay there before
No,
they found you out?
not too long, about an hour or so.
What, the medics, they just kind of followed the troops in?
Right, oh yes, right behind. And they, they picked me up and brought me back in a tent, like a hospital tent. And then I discover, I was fully conscious then, I discovered, I looked, the pants were like corduroy pants. And I saw the blood all over, see. And I felt, and I still had the spoon in my pocket, I had a soup spoon, which is, I carry all since I left home, And apparently the bullet hit the spoon and lodged right on the side of a hip bone, see, and stayed there. Bullet didn't go through. See. So they took me in the hospital, and it didn't look like it was anything serious, But they said we have to operate and get the bullet out. In the meantime, they took me way back to Crimea, put me in the hospital.
Now, Alex, when you got hit by the bullet, how long had you actually been on the front?
3 days or so, 3 days.
Okay, so you went to the hospital in Crimea, and how long were you in the hospital there?
About 5-6 weeks, I guess. 5-6 weeks. They operate and pull, take the bullet out. And I was walking on the crutch. And almost I can manage to walk with a cane around the hospital, But I still was in pain, changing the bandages every day and all this kind of thing. So then we hear that the Bolsheviks broke through the line, the front line, and swarmed the full length of the front. And the whole White Army was in panic and retreat. The only place they can go is in Black Sea all around.
They were backed up all the way to the Black Sea
Right
as it
against the
was.
Black Sea. So quickly, the Allies were alerted, and again, United States destroyers stood by, and the French fleet also, and the British fleet, and they evacuated us to the hospital very quickly. But it wasn't anywhere that you can go. It was only barges, you see. And they put us on a barge. It's a cold barge. And all the hospital wounded people were carried up there. And American destroyer picked us up and pulled us away towards the Black Sea, in the middle of the Black Sea, in fact, and left us and went back to pick up some other people. And that was the panic. They say that the scenes of suicide were unbelievable.
Suicide?
A mass suicide, yes. People, the officers of the cavalry, used to get to the edge of the Black Sea, and there's no way that they're going to be saved. They pull the guns and kill themselves. I didn't see this. I was told this is what happened there. Because whoever was caught, I'm sure they were all executed by Red Army.
So you were lucky to get away.
Yes.
Okay, so the destroyer left you out there on the barge, floating around on the Black Sea.
And
What time of the year was this?
That was September, August or September. They pick us up again, and they pull us right to the Dardanelles, to Bosphorus, which is near Constantinople, Turkey. And it was an island. There was a French hospital there, and they put us in there. It's a military outpost like French. And I stayed there, and I was able to walk pretty fair. Still walk with a cane, but a little bit at a time I would walk freely,
So from
We got
there,
all the news about the Constantinople, the Galata Bridge is right nearby, that you can walk from there right across to Constantinople.
so from that point on, you were no longer in the army. You were actually just in the
Well, yeah,
hospital.
refugee,
A
right.
refugee,
Right.
more so.
Right.
There wasn't any plan for you to go back. Was the White Army dispersed at this time, and there was no plan for you to go back, or?
Well, the army really was absolutely disorganized. There were all the individuals that were in the army. And there was still talk and hopes of getting army back somehow, with the consultation with the Americans and British. But nothing happened,
How long was it until the White Army actually surrendered or gave up? When did the fighting actually end?
That was the end.
When the end was when you were actually back up
That
into
was
the
in
Black Sea?
1921. September 1921, that was the end.
Okay.
The Bolsheviks took the whole thing in their hands, you see. So wound up in Turkey. And it was thousands of Russian refugees in Constantinople.
But actually, you were on an island.
Yeah, I was in the
hospital.
in the hospital. But very quickly we found out that we really don't know how to stay here. That was going to keep us, if we can get back to Constantinople, well, maybe we'll be better off. At least we knew there was a consulate there, and a large population of white Russians, so we were not going to get lost, you see. Yet we were under control there of the sentries and, the post people standing in the wires all around you and all this kind of thing. And I found out that once a day we have to go out and bring water, you see, from outside of a compound. And there was a big kettle, I'd say about 20 gallons, and a wooden stick that goes across, and it takes two men. You take this end and the other man takes the other end, and you carry this to the fountain, you see, which is kind of a drip.
It's a pump. Is it a pump or a fountain?
No, it
You
was
pump
like a natural,
Oh, I see.
natural.
So you didn't have to stand
No,
there?
you don't pump, you see. But the water just barely dripped, very, very narrow
Straight.
stream of water. So what you do is you put this thing and you sit down and talk and wait till it fills up, you see, and then you'll turn around and you carry it back, you see. And the next day you do the same thing, you see. So somehow I found out that from there you can easily get to the bridge. See, and if you walk across the bridge, then you were in the Constantinople. See. So the fellow that was my buddy there, who shared the beds together nearby. So I told him, I said, listen, tomorrow, I said, why don't we take this water, the bucket, and leave it half full, let the water drip, and then just go home. He said, you think you can do it? I said, well, if you're willing to take a chance, I'm willing to take a chance. And that's just what we did. We just let this water dripping, and dump. Once we get on the bridge, nobody pays any attention to us. We cross, and the next thing we knew, we were right in the main street of Constantinople. Meet Russians by getting information where's the consulate and all this.
Didn't you see some people there on the street that had actually gone to get some water and they'd probably done the same thing that you had?
I don't know.
Probably had all escaped that.
I don't know. Eventually they all left. See, eventually they didn't stay there long, I think the French authority just let them go, unless there was some that were badly sick.
Alex, we've talked about your family history, we've talked about your mother and father, and now we've taken you up through your time in the White Army until you were wounded, and now we've left you at Constantinople. Let's go back and talk now about what you remember in your boyhood.
All right. Well, we lived in a house in Kiev, which was fairly modern house by those times. But the entrance very well guarded. Then you walk into a yard, then you cross the yard, then you enter the house. And the house was large. As I remember, it must be a 14-room house. But the part of the house, about 6 rooms, were for some executives or the managers that worked in the store and servants. The house was overlooking from the other side, from the back side, into a hilly garden-like area. Also, it's a courtyard. Then there's places for storage. They help the maintenance people, the horses, carriages, and so on. And above it was a hill which was developed into a garden with a croquet field and the walks in a zigzag fashion. Some parts were for flowers. And then you reach the top, and on the top was a kind of a plateau with a very large trees. I remember one was a walnut tree. It was a very unusual in the contour, and low, the lower branches was very low, so you can very easily climb, and you make it kind of a places like a tree house and spend a lot of time there running back and forth and so on with the neighbors, and a sort of playing area. The school was most important period.
Alex, let's get back. There's some more things I want you to tell about the house. Like, what was the address?
Oh,
You remember the address?
yeah, the address was number 5, Basejna ulica. Basejna is a street. Mm-hmm. And it was an area of 3 consecutive estates, like connected. And it's adjacent to not too far from a main street, which was Christiatic, where all the hotels and the fashionable
So it was right in the heart
shops.
of the, was it in the heart of the city?
In the heart of the city, yes. Mm-hmm. So the right in the corner of a main street was our store. So the store was actually within walking distance from our house. And the decorations of the house were, well, the newest things that you can get in that particular period.
Didn't you say that the dining room was
Yeah,
very
the
large?
dining room was very large. I remember that I rode a bicycle around the dining room table. The table was set up in sections to extends, and we had about 36 chairs, and some of the chairs were along the wall, and the table itself was extended to maybe 2/3 of the dining room, and then additional leaves can go on the table and extend it to full size. So during the holidays, when you have a guest, the sitting capacity was fairly large.
Right. Now, tell us about the icebox. Wasn't that
Oh yes, that was
memorable?
in the very late, it's 1918, I guess, that the icebox was a novelty. Was very ornately decorated, and my father got it, one of the first ones now among our friends, and it was placed in the dining room. And it was ice with the doors on the left side and the right side, and you use like cold wines and vodka, and fruit, mostly fruit, and cheeses and so on. And it was in a prominent place in the dining room, and my father was very proud how it operates, because it was kind of a messy thing. You have to drain the water and all that kind of thing. But that was a very big novelty item in the household.
Alex, tell me about your house, like during the holidays, like at Christmas time. What would
Yes.
you do?
Well, during the holidays, all the big holidays, like Christmas is a 3-day holiday. New Year is a 3-day holiday, and traditionally it's divided in such a way that the first day you go outside to your family to have a dinner or parties or whatever it is. The second day, your guests invited to your house, relatives. You see. And the third day was official reception day, and it was done in a manner of receiving your guests from a certain period of time, like at 12 o'clock noon until 6 o'clock in the evening. And the house is decorated, and maids are all dressed up, waiting in the receiving room to open the doors and take their coats and whatever. And then the family reception consists of my mother all dressed up, my sister, and myself dressed up in the velvet costume with the patent leather shoes and a white collar and that kind of thing. And the guest arrives, some of the guests that visit you that you don't ordinarily meet during the year. You might have heard of them. That's like a mayor and judges and church people and school officials and the business associates and so on. And the procedure was that they walk in and we line up to shake hands, and the mother invites them to sit down in the living room, which was arranged in the way of a sitting section with a table, sofas and chairs and a carpet, chairs all around, and then in the middle of the table was the traditional album, family album, with a silver cover on the top, and also pictures of the history of the family, actually what it is. And after the conversation, whatever it is, then they go in the dining room, and the dining room was a buffet set in such a way that very little room, maybe 10 feet of a table was open table, and the rest of it was a buffet with the decorative things, the plants and whatever, if it's decorated, the hams and the caviars with ice ball and all that kind of thing, the liquors. And walk in, and the maid will offer us what would you like to drink, And the samovar was traditionally on the table for tea. So a lot of people drink tea there. And they sit down and they push around. And usually at the table and talk for a few minutes, and off they go. This visit usually is limited to about 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the most.
Okay, Alex, now your father wasn't at home. He was out
Right.
doing
At the same time,
the visiting, right?
the father makes a list with a very careful preparation for his round of calling. And it's done 3-4 days in advance with a very intricate arrangement of a route, which way you go first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on. And he was all dressed up in the formal suit, the striped trousers.
Mm-hmm. Would he go out in a horse and carriage, or
yes,
a sleigh?
Yeah, in a sleigh, and the sleigh was decorated. The horse is covered with a colorful net, and on the bottom of a net is like a pom-poms, like a cotton ball, like, I don't know, there's another word, but, well, anyway, when the horse races, that kind of flows on the sides. It's a beautiful, beautiful sight to see.
And the horses didn't usually have those, that was just for holidays?
Oh yeah, this is well, it's almost sort of a racing horses, especially taking care of, and all this kind of thing.
Did your father drive the sleigh himself, or did he have?
No, he had the coachman, and the seat was covered with black fur for him to sit, you see. And usually when he gets home, he'll feel, well, you have to have a drink almost in every place that you go. But that was the evening, you can hardly move. So usually when he gets home, he goes right to bed. Then on the next day we hear the stories, who we saw and how it's this one and that one and the other day.
Right. Now, Alex, was that at Christmas and New Year's?
Just
or
New Year, just New Year's Day.
Is there anything that you want to tell about what your family did on Christmas? Did you have a Christmas tree?
Oh yes,
Did you exchange
Christmas
gifts?
preparation is a quite complex for the household, because they do all the baking, for instance, long before. But in the Easter time, particularly, with the preparation of a Pascha, which was it's a sort of a cake like a sponge cake, and the form about 18, 20 inches high, and the top of it is decorated with a white frosting, and the frosting is sprinkled with colorful beads, candy beads like, and usually it's a lamb on the top,
That's a
or
traditional
some traditional Easter
cake.
Pascha, called Pascha.
Mhm.
And you have this during all 3 days of a celebration, you see. Because the church services were very, very impressive
Now,
during
tell us what
during the
church,
Easter time, see.
what was the name of your church?
It's a Russian Orthodox
Mhm.
Orthodox church, and cathedrals were the one that we had was on a square with a lot of room around. It's very decorative of the structure itself.
Did it have
That
spires,
you
domes?
see this in like in Moscow cathedrals. You see these pictures. Some of covered with well, it's not gold leaf, not a gold paint, I would say, which is always taken care of and all this. And there's a very, very, very large cathedral ceremonial, and all the household bring baskets with them. And in a basket you have Easter eggs and Pascha and some kind of a biscuits that you serve during that particular also. In French it's called a savoyard. Savoyard is dry cookies like, you know, that you have it on the table and you eat for 3 days. And all these baskets are lined up outside of a cathedral. And at the end of a ceremony, the choir and the priests with the icons and huge candles walk out of cathedral, and they walk around in front of all these people that have these baskets, and the priest is blessing this food baskets towards the end of the ceremony. And everybody stands with a candle in their hands. And the candle is protected with made out of a paper, you put on the top of a lamp like a glass. This is made out of paper. You do it yourself, so the wind will not blow the candle. See, because the whole tradition is that you have to walk home with the lit candle. You see, and all the streets from this cathedral are all decorated with lights, electric lights, like they do during the Christmas holidays. Different colors of red and green and white and so on. See? And you walk with a basket, all your family, and trying to get home without losing a light.
Is it bad luck to lose the light on your candle?
That's right, that kind of a thing.
Sounds like the Easter celebration is more like our Christmas celebration with the lights.
Right.
Is that right? How
Well,
they, you were saying with the Christmas lights along the streets, along the
They
streets.
do it
that's
also
done
for
on Easter.
Christmas, but
Oh,
there's no, you don't carry candles, you know. But that was quite a impressive thing, you know, when you get home and you're so proud that you brought the candle light home.
Alex, now, why don't you tell me something about the land that your father owned? You said that at one point in time you'd actually seen the land.
Right.
Tell me about the trip when you went to
Right.
see your father's land.
The area that my father owned land was very far away from Kiev, and my father was making trips about once a year. Sometimes it's during the summer, sometimes in the winter time. No, the one time that he took me with him, it wasn't the winter time. And you get from Moscow, you go by train, and I can't even think the name of the city, the nearest city to Island, Rostovsk, I think it was the name of Rostovsk. And then from then on, you have a sleigh, and well, not just for a single person, but a little bit larger sleigh, and bundle me up, you know. And
You went in the winter.
in the winter time, and you you ride the sleigh until you enter the first village, and they all know that you're coming. So you have a committee that meeting you, and at the entrance to a village, they build an arch decorated with pine branches and the name welcome. And then usually the priest of that area, the church, the head of a church, and whoever is in charge in the village, they select a certain house, and you stay there and spend time enough to rest up, you know, from a trip, and then you go to the next village. You see, and then the next one, the next. Some days you have villages close by. You can make two or three villages in one day. See. Then you stop and stay overnight, and sometimes overnight and half a day. And the next trip is very short, something like this.
And would your father meet with the village people, then,
Right.
the officials for the village?
Right. And they're having almost meeting like what they like to have, and what happened, what's the prospect for the future, and the output of food that they receive from their land, and the improvements that they've made, the additional equipment that they might need, and all this kind of thing. So my father comes back and he's got a folder, a briefcase like, but for each place, making notations of what has to be done, the instructions, and in many cases, additional funds, money for improvements, and almost mandatory was a special donation for church.
That's why the priest was always so happy to see him.
Yes, yeah.
When he got to the city.
Yeah, and this runs into substantial amount. I mean, they don't give $100 or $1,000, but enough to sustain, or they usually tell him what they want. They want to rebuild the church, they want to repaint, you know, and all this. So that runs into thousands of dollars like this.
Well, how many villages were there?
17 altogether.
And did you go to all 17 of
Yes.
them?
Yeah.
All in one trip?
In one trip, we spent about 2 weeks, I guess.
I see. And you traveled around in a sleigh?
Right,
Now-
then we back again home.
Right, but you remember some of the children in the village?
Yes, yeah, I remember in one place was boys, two was about my age, and they took me for a sleigh ride. The sleds in Russia were popular. They have a different name from a sled. I think it's they have it in Olympics today. Locker.
They're more like a bobsled?
No. It's a sled with a narrow bottom and a sharp front, you see. So if you lean forward, it almost balances.
That's how you steer?
Luge, the name of them. Luge. In Olympics, they have a luge races, you see. When they lay down on the stomach, a single person can ride. So you lay on the stomach and
and you go real fast.
and steer in front, and you go at tremendous speed. And was a hill and a lake on the bottom of a hill, and lake was naturally frozen, see. And apparently, the old villages that have lakes, they drill the holes in ice for getting water, for one thing, and sometimes for fishing too. See. And you have to go at a tremendous speed on this sled, and you have to go over this open holes.
You did? where they drilled out holes in the ice?
Well, fortunately, the way it's done, it's a hole in the lake, and because they take the water constantly out, so the water spills on the top and it keeps freezing, so it's a kind of a ledge.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hit this, the sled goes right up and you're on the other side. This was the food was very interesting. They have a milk, for instance. They bake milk in the oven in special pitchers, crockery pitchers, and apparently when they finish preparation of food for a day or so, they put this milk after they finish, and that stays in the oven overnight. And in the morning, they take these pitchers of milk out. They're about 2 quarts capacity, and on the top of it will be a skin-like crust, you see, and the cream from the high temperature, whatever, sets on the top, see, and the milk itself has a kind of a rose color shade.
Yeah, why does it turn that color?
Well, because of the temperature, heat temperature or whatever. But the upper part, the cream, they scoop out, and they use it for a different purpose. And then the rest of it cools off, and the drink is a milk, and it is delicious.
And it's rose-colored milk.
Yeah, it's delicious in
Is that
taste.
Why do they cook it? Is it some sort of process to keep it good rather than refrigerating it? Why?
Well, I really don't know, but it was accepted thing. Everybody was.
But you didn't do that in your home?
No.
This was something the
No,
villagers did?
you have to get this specially from villages around. You can get it. That cream, by the way, is used for like a strawberries, on the top of a strawberries. And they're just out of this world, a little sugar, And the strawberries are not cultivated strawberries, but they're wild strawberries. It's very good.
What about borscht? That's the only thing I've heard being a
Borscht is
Russian stew. Did you eat that at home, or was that one
yes.
the villagers ate?
Oh yes, it's all over, and it's an accepted thing. You can eat borscht every single day before your main course. There's like a plate of soup. And,
Did you eat differently than the villagers, though? Did you have did you eat more continental cuisine?
Yes, very much so. Particularly the veal items are they're exotic dishes. Milk-fed veal, and mostly the French recipes.
Now, the villagers, they didn't eat caviar, for instance.
No, you don't
Would
see
they-
caviar in the village, no.
It wasn't a common
No,
thing for all Russians
no,
to
the
just
caviar was expensive in the cities. Like for instance, on the basis of our value here, a pound of caviar probably will cost $40-50, you see.
So your family didn't even eat caviar?
Oh, yes, we did,
well,
because we
not
owned
only
the
did-
store, and
Would you eat it every day, once a
No,
week, once
no,
a month? It was more of a,
For
special item.
special occasions, special occasions only. Most of the time when you have a guest, the caviar, it comes with the different grades. In Russia, for instance, some of the caviar very seldom is exported. It's called the pressed caviar. Pressed caviar. It comes in a loaf-like, wrapped into linen and made into a form of a square. And you cut the linen off as you slice, and then you slice with a knife.
it's almost formed like a pate?
Yeah, exactly.
And served that
exactly
way?
What it is.
Would you eat the caviar on crackers?
Crackers, yeah, crackers.
Now, Alex, why don't we go ahead and talk about your school? That's interesting.
The school is very preoccupied as far as the time is concerned. Once you enter the school, you live and breathe school and nothing else but school for many years, like 8 years. You have to be 10 or 11 years old before you can enter into school. It's called a gymnasia. Gymnasia is equivalent of high school plus about 2 years of college. In fact, if you graduated from gymnasia, you automatically get credit in the United States for 2 years of college. The time of the days it's from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, some days till 6 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 days a week. So you only have 1 day off on Sunday. And as far as the year is concerned, it's 11 months a year. You only have 1 month of July off. There are final examinations at the end of June, then you have a month off, and the 1st of August you're back to school. The number of subjects that are taught in school, of course there is no such thing as a selection of subjects.
No elective courses.
No elected courses. Everything is established and followed very vigorously. The courses of, for instance, the history, probably divided in 3 different things: ancient history and contemporary history and so on. The Russian literature is also divided by periods of 18th, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, and so on. And the strong emphasis on languages, the Latin, ancient Greek, French, German, and of course Russian. And all of these are continuous throughout 8 years of schooling. So when you finish, you have 8 years of Latin, 8 years of ancient Greek, 8 years of German, 8 years of French.
Alex, you said that you start school when you're 10 or 11 years old. What happens like between the time you're 6 and 10? Is there any school that goes on at home?
It's like a grade school. It's a grade school, and you go there until you are 10 years old, and it's a preparatory to the entrance into school. Now, some schools have they're very strict on who they accept in a school. It isn't that you just go and get it, you have to qualify. And if you are on the borderline, they might send you back to a grade school for another year. In some school, they have a pre-entrance a year. You see, they are in the separate quarters, and they don't wear the uniform, they're taught separately. And sometimes they take a student in the first year, and the teacher figured that he will not keep up with the pace or something like this. They transfer him into that class, preparatory class. So he spends another year there before he gets in the first class.
Now this education system, this isn't public education, this is a private school, right? You went to private schools?
It's a private school, but all the schools were controlled by the government.
Well, did the villagers didn't have this kind of an education,
No,
did they?
No, they have to, this type of schools were in the cities. So that all the villagers have to move to the nearest city and join the school there, that way.
Right, but like, for an example, the people that worked in your store, in your retail store, or possibly your cook or your coachman,
Right.
where did their children go to school? Their children didn't go to the same school yours did?
No,
You did,
no.
right? What kind of a school
Well,
did those kind of children
they
go to?
have other schools. They're not classified. This school is called the classical schools. You see, classical because they specialize in the classical subjects and so on. The other schools are not as mandatory, and they're sponsored by government,
Right,
and-
but for instance, a coachman's son could not go to your school, or
No.
could they?
No, not easy, see, unless he has the qualifications. And the qualifications come from who your parents are first, that kind of a thing. And it gets harder as you grow older, and if you enter into universities, they're even more selected. And then I think I mentioned to you, the Lyceum is very selective because they prepare people for representing Russia.
To become
Political
diplomats.
diplomats, you see, ambassadors and consuls all over the world. And that school was very difficult to get in because usually these positions require people that are substantially rich to be able to afford to represent, like an ambassadors, for instance, because the government will not pay the tremendous amount of money that they spend.
Right, now that's what your father had planned for you, right?
Right,
To become a diplomat.
right.
Let's see. Now, back
So,
to your school.
all right.
Alex, what did you wear to school? And was it just a boys' school, or did girls go to your school too?
Just boys only.
Did girls have their own school?
The girls have exactly the same thing. We have almost the same curriculum, uniforms. Everybody wears uniforms. And the uniforms doesn't change. Your insignia on your hat tells you what school you belong to, and you have a book of rules and regulations that you're supposed to carry with you when you're on your own or with your parents, you see. And strictly controlled regulations. What you can do, what you can't do. You see.
Describe your uniform. that
The
you wore to
uniform
school.
was black trousers and a shirt made out of wool, black shirt with about six buttons, 2 buttons in the neck area and 4 buttons down, and a black belt with a silver buckle, with the insignia of a school on the buckle.
Right, now tell
And the overcoat was a gray overcoat, but there's silver buttons, and the back is made like a military coat with a slit in the back and a little, what do you call it?
belt?
Not a belt, it's 2 buttons and hold it
Mm-hmm.
in the back. belt. Then your belt, you don't wear it usually unless you're in a parade.